Greetings. Welcome to the Consciouspreneur Conversation. Welcome. My name is Kimberly Williams.
Yes, and I'm Jeff Billingsley. Happy to be here. Happy to be with you all globally.
And in just a few moments, as you can see, we have on deck Samad Davis. We will be having a wonderful conversation with him. But right now, I would love to focus on bringing him into the conversation and welcoming him on board. This is the Consciouspreneur Conversation. I'm so happy to be here. This is our second episode. So welcome back to all of you tuning in again from all over the world. Consciouspreneur Conversation welcomes you. This is a safe place for you in this time of uncertainty. This is a place to stand and a place to rebuild and rebound. Welcome to the Consciouspreneur Conversation, where we are all going through this together and we are agile.
Yes. And I think it's important that everyone that's out there realizes that you are not alone. Everybody that is in business for themselves, everybody that's just out here in whatever community you're in, whatever career you're in, whatever your social, and we're all going through this together in real time. But we're not still, and we're not immobilizing and brainstorming ways to move things forward. So this is a part of a platform to continue conversations around building generational wealth, building legacy, building your brand, building your business, and being a part of a movement that is about empowerment. That is about empowerment, pardon me. So welcome, and I think it's important that we give some people that may have not been with us last time a little bit of backstory about who we are, what we're doing, and we could, begin to move into the conversation after that. I'm gonna leave that to you, Kim.
Well, what we're doing is called creating space to reflect, just like what is happening in our world has forced us to create space within ourselves and amongst each other. So this is a space online called Consciouspreneur Conversation, which is for just that. It's a place to talk about business. It's a place to talk about taking things to the next level. It's a place where we figure out how to create wealth and legacies. This is a space for us to come together. It's cool. I'm here in my living room. Jeff is there in his living room. And we're coming to you wherever you are, at your kitchen table, in your living room, in your bedroom, wherever it is. Guess what time it is? It's time for us to build wealth and build legacy. Now, this program, we're in our second episode, but we actually thought this was going to be a live event called Consciouspreneur, a live experience. But reality had a different plan for us. But because we're entrepreneurs, we pivoted, right?
Of course.
That's what we did. We pivoted. Matter of fact, we weren't supposed to have our first Consciouspreneur experience until the end of April. But here we are in our second episode.
True.
So that's how we do it. And it's that spirit of always being able to be visionary, to be fearless, or at least be courageous, and always be designing something new. That's the spirit of what Consciouspreneur Conversations is about. And we're bringing entrepreneurs to the table who are going to tell us their story, tell us their tips, tell us their insights on how we can do that and be global in our entrepreneurial pursuits.
Well, I'm excited, and I'm excited because the person that we have as a guest, Samad Davis, is a Newark, New Jersey native, and I could give you 2 or 3 different variations of who he is, who he was when I met him, and today who he is as an entrepreneur, a global entrepreneur. But I don't want to do him the disservice, so I'm gonna give you a little backstory in regards to how we met and who he is to me. Samad Davis is someone who was actually one of the first people that I ever met from my city that produced, directed, owned independent film. The film was called Dirty Game, and that's when we kind of really met. But he was somebody, while I was in the music industry and doing music, he was already creating content at that level where he took the ball from doing a movie independent film locally in Newark, New Jersey, and has traveled the globe and established himself as a worldwide content producer. But I'm not going to even belabor you all with that. I'm going to kind of run down some of the key areas of his business acumen, so you're clear on why he's a guest here and why he's somebody that we partner and work with. He's also a board member for the Newark Business Hub as well. Samad, his business development focuses between North America and Africa. He is a U.S.-based entrepreneur and philanthropist who has been working in various sectors of Africa for over a decade. You might think that he's only a content producer, but this is why I want to read this off, because this is very important to talk about versatility and being diverse. Samad has developed strong, influential political and commercial networks across Africa and the United States. He focused developing business and trade opportunities between U.S. private sector and emerging markets in Africa. In doing so, he's worked in renewable energy projects, technology projects, waste to energy solar projects, small wind agriculture, filtration mining, heavy mining, equipment leasing, new housing, infrastructure, financing, and of course, construction and entertainment. So, I say all of that to say, we have to be very clear about what defines what we call an entrepreneur. And I think, we're at a time and place where we're going to see a lot more people becoming more acclimated and active as entrepreneurs. So without any further ado, I want to invite and introduce you all to Samad Davis.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Welcome, Samad. Welcome.
Thank you. And congratulations on the new platform.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's fascinating. I think it's innovative. And again, I commend you for the pivot, right? It's all about the pivot. It's all about the pivot. Yes. Yes.
So Jeff, has talked so much to me about you, and I've had the pleasure of doing business with you and inviting you and collaborating with you on the Newark Business Hub as a board member. So I want to just thank you for your impact, even locally and globally. But I just can't wait to jump into, asking you about your story. If I can, Jeff, ask the first question.
Please.
Yeah, in these times, these are really crazy times, and it's more than a notion. It's easier said than done, as they say, for you to say, you know what, it's time to pivot, or I need to figure it out, or put into a new game plan, some new action steps. It takes more than a notion to do that. How do you keep yourself motivated in these times? What do you say to yourself to keep you at your highest operation, even though it looks like the sky is falling?
That's very interesting. And I can appreciate that question. I would say, people complain about, how hard they might have, how hard it was to grow up, or the environment they grew up in. And I think I embrace that. I embrace the rough environment that I grew up in because I'm used to pivoting. I'm used to a rough road. I'm used to things not going right. Typically, I don't expect things to go right. So I'm always prepared for them to go wrong and hope for the best. So, I don't go to the corner and curl up and say, what's going to happen next? I just got to keep figuring it out. And I think as an entrepreneur, that is the one thing that will always separate you from anyone else. You have to look at a situation and see it from a different lens than everyone else does, right? That's I think at the core, that's what you have to be able to do. If everyone's going this way, you say, well, what's going on that way? And why is everyone going that way? And just because everyone's going that way doesn't mean they're right? Because it might be a whole nother level of opportunity this way. And you have to be able to think outside the box. Personally, I don't believe in a box. The minute you start to say, I'm thinking outside the box, that means you think with certain rules that have been imposed on you. And so your thought and your movement is limited within this box that you believe is acceptable or not. So I don't believe in a box. That's first and foremost. And then I have this thing where I totally believe in operating on a certain station mentally, because everything starts mentally. And the minute that you understand what channel, what vibration, what frequency you're operating on mentally, you will be able to filter information accordingly. So things will automatically go, that's a waste of time. That is worth my time. That is something I should look into. And if I do this, does this all end me off in a place where I want to be at the end? What is your end game? So for me, I always measure things based on my end game. Some people call it a vision board, right? What is my vision for myself? How do I see myself in the next 5 years? What are the goals that I want? Right? I lump all of that into the end game. And the end game will always dictate for me what my movement is, or anything I get involved in or waste my time and energy in. It has to be on the same journey that leads me to my end game.
So I'm definitely in agreement with that, but for several reasons. But I always said to myself that I wanted to make sure that I was able to not only do business globally, but how do I go into Africa, not as just a visitor and not someone that's just a tourist. And I said to myself, I'm not going to Africa. Anybody that knows me, I say I'm not going to Africa without talking to Samad. Yeah. When it's time for me to go to Africa, I got to touch base with, I got to check in, and I got to make sure that he's available, he's around, and everything else. So the question I want to ask is, what led you to Africa, and how critical is it to maintain and elevate your brand in operating in global markets and locally?
You got to let the viewers know that you ultimately did make it to Africa.
No doubt.
And with me.
No doubt.
Into Africa, right? So I can tell you the story, but I will tell you this. Again, I think anyone, I don't care if it's America, I don't care if you're in the UK, I don't care if you are in any country within Africa, right? If you are still in 2020, let's put aside what we're all going through right now, and let's remain vigilant and prayerful that things get back to a place where some semblance of normalcy, let's just say. Okay, you cannot operate from I'm just concerned about the American market, or I'm just concerned about, if I'm in Ghana, I'm just concerned about the Ghana market. If I'm in the UK, I'm just concerned about the UK market. We are in a global society. The only difference is what time zone are we in, right? We get information the same. It's just a matter of who wakes up first to receive it. And then next thing you know, it's being shared on Twitter, it's being shared on Instagram, Facebook, yada, 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 right? We're all getting information the same. So that means that we're in a global market. The world is far too small now. You can get anywhere in the world you want by airplane. And people are more receptive based on the way we communicate now through social media and through entertainment. The world is a lot smaller. So I cannot just focus on any one market. When I was in Newark, New Jersey, it was a Jersey thing, right? Then I said, okay, I own restaurants in New York. When I started doing film, I started running independent films all throughout the Southeast, all the way to California. When there were mom and pop shops and record shops where you could actually buy a movie or a CD. And then naturally, once you conquer the U.S., it's like, well, what's next, right? You cannot think in just for one market. You just can't. And if you're in business and you just have a my market mentality, I think you're going to lose in the end. Maybe not lose, maybe a bit rich, but I think you're limiting yourself. And me being a Sagittarius, I'm a what do you call it? I like to explore. You know, I'm ambitious. I like to explore. I love people. I love meeting new people and understanding, you know, different opportunities, new cultures. All of that stuff plays a part. And the minute that you start to travel, your mind just expands more. You start hearing other people's perspective, other cultures' perspective, how they view stuff, how they view America, right? Based on the music and based on the film and TV content. All of these things help form my view as it relates to thinking globally. In anything I'm involved in, I have to look at it from a standpoint, will it also work in this market or that market? Can it travel beyond our market? If I had to speak for a second on the film and TV side, there was a time in Hollywood they would say black films. If you were producing a black film, you know, films with African Americans or people of color as the leads, they would tell you, well, those films or that content won't do well overseas, right? And so we can only pay you XYZ because this is the only market it will play in. But the minute you travel overseas and you see, wow, they know all of our stuff. I mean, anywhere, France, whether it be UK, whether it be anywhere in Africa, and you start to see, well, they're consuming the same content. That was a lie, right? So you can't believe that. Now, how I got into Africa is a very interesting story. If you want me to go into that, I'm more than happy to do so.
Yeah.
Okay, so naturally, as an independent film and TV content creator, typically every project, let me just tell you, so there's the Hollywood side, right? Hollywood side, when I say Hollywood, I'm speaking from a standpoint of how projects get funded, okay? So if that's a big studio movie or a TV series that's on Grey's Anatomy or anything like that, those are typically funded by the big companies, right? The big Hollywood studios or the big networks. They fund it, people produce it, that's what you have. Then so now if you step into the independent world, meaning you create something, you go out and find the financing for it, okay? And then you produce it, and then you figure out how to monetize it. That's independent. That means none of the big companies wrote you a check to go produce that. So now we're in the independent world. Now, if you're doing movies, typically you raise money for a film, you do the film, you have to wait to monetize it. Now, by the time you're ready to go to the next film, you have to figure out how to raise the money for that budget. Then you have to do that again and again and again. So 2007, I said, I'm going to create a film fund. I'm going to create a fund. I'm going to raise money to create a fund. And this fund will allow me to draw down for a slate of projects. So we can just go on to the next one. We don't have to do the dance all over again every time we're ready to do another project. We can just say, okay, this year in 2000, whatever, we're going to do 3 films and 2 TV series. And the budgets are going to be XYZ, right? And then we're going to do the first one, then go to the next one. Meanwhile, the first one is cash flowing. You see it's going back to the pot. Meanwhile, the next one is coming through, it's going back to the pot. You get it? So it's a fund that will allow you to constantly keep producing without stopping and spending a year running around trying to find investors for each project. So a waste of time. I'd rather spend the time creating enough money, raising enough money to do multiple things and put a business model around it so that it's a good business case. My investors are happy. I'm happy. I can keep growing the brand and the business and growing the intellectual property library. So that was my plan, right? And one of my first investors was, and I won't say any names, but was a person in Wall Street, a female, who was running a securities firm for about 20 years and was very, very successful. And I was introduced to her by a mutual friend who said, who was also in Hollywood, and said that my friend would be very interested. She has the mindset to understand what you're trying to do. And I took that meeting, took a few weeks. I got the meeting. We met at a nice restaurant, all three of us in New York City. And I had already presented my pitch and all the documentation. So this was a yes or no meeting, if you will. It wasn't to pitch. So I got into the meeting, and then it went from, I love how you presented it. It makes sense. And after, some in-person dialogue and stuff, that person agreed to be my first investor, first $2 million investor for this fund. Now, as an entrepreneur, at this dinner, I'm already excited that I've accomplished what we set out to accomplish. But the conversation shifted to, I wanted to know, as an entrepreneur, from one entrepreneur to another, naturally this person is far more successful and has done a hell of a job in the industry that they operated in. What was next? I always ask other entrepreneurs, what's the next chapter for you? What's next? And this question changed my life. Had I not asked this question, you wouldn't even be interviewing me right now. Maybe for some other reason.
I was asked the same question.
Yeah. So the question was, what's next? And the person proceeded to tell me, I made a lot of money on Wall Street. For me, it's about legacy. They were going into the legacy phase, and they had a natural calling to Africa. This is an African-American woman. And her thing was, I want to take my resources, my knowledge, my expertise, and all my relationships, and I want to help governments in Africa grow their money and help them structure infrastructure projects, affordable housing projects, roads, bridges. That's what her legacy was. That's what she wanted to do. She said, the only problem is I don't have the right connections into Africa. Now, I'm gonna step back to move forward. And I hope I'm not taking too long, but I think this will help you understand. Okay? Is that okay?
So you think?
Okay. So my uncle, my father's a lawyer. My father's been in back and forth to Africa many times. He speaks French fluently. And he also worked for my great uncle who ran an institution called the Third World Trade Institute, which was designed to establish trade between developing nations in Africa and the Caribbean and the U.S. government. So he was responsible for so much, for a lot of trade deals, and as Africa was gaining its independence, different countries were gaining their independence, and as new presidents came into power, the first order of business would be to what? To look at how do you establish trade, right? If you look at your resources as a country, you say, okay, we have this or we have that. We need to start establishing trades with the US, Europe, UK, China, to start bringing money into your country. And he was that conduit for the United States. So every head of state came through my uncle's office. And then he's gone to Africa, I don't know, 390-something times. And if you think back to when Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman in Africa, in Zaire, present-day Congo, that same uncle helped facilitate that because he worked with the different heads of state, right? That's how far back he goes. So every time Muhammad Ali went to Africa, my uncle was part of that. So fast forward, I'm coming back to a point where for years, my father would say, son, let's invest in buses in Congo. Let's let's figure out a way to do this or do that. And my father always knew I was a, entrepreneur, always willing to try something. But I just wasn't there. And at that time, I'd never been to Africa, right? So over the years, my father would always promote, join him in Africa, my uncle is as well. So when she said I don't have the right connections in Africa, I knew no one. Actually, I told my father about that meeting. He said, well, you should call your uncle because there's no one living right now who has more connections to the continent of Africa than your uncle. Give him a call in the morning. And so I called him. Now, at that time, his hardest thing was figuring out what day of the week it was because he retired. He had a nice house he built in Florida, and every day was Sunday, So when I called him, he said, okay, I like the idea. Let's talk about it. He's old school, so he's not rushing into anything. And then I sent her his legacy page so she can see everything about him, what he's done, so everything. And so she called me into the office naturally. And then I got them on the phone. And when I got them on the phone, it turned to, so let me just back up. The meeting was a Monday. I talked to my uncle on a Tuesday. I'm in the office in New York, her office in New York on Wednesday. And by Friday, I'm in Florida. We're all in Florida for the weekend. And so it went from me meeting this person to discuss this film fund, to now discussing Africa, to now marrying her legacy play to what my uncle's and father's life work. And so this turned into an all weekend thing. And then before the weekend was out, we said we're forming a company in the United States and the UK to do different investments and joint ventures in Africa. And then before I left, they asked me, they said, listen, we need you. I'm going to take care of the financing. This one's going to take care of the legal. This one's going to take care of getting us into whatever. But we need you to do the grunt work since you're the youngest of us all, and you have the ability to connect the dots. We need you.
Listen, that was getting how that connected to that. That's a marketable skill set, a valuable skill set within itself.
Yeah. So they it was funny because all three of them surrounded me and they put the pressure on me. They said, well, what are you going to do? Because this is going to affect your vision for your film stuff. So what are you going to do? What do you say? And I said, well, I'm an entrepreneur first and foremost. I can always come back and do a film, right? So I took the leap of faith. 3 weeks later, I'm in Africa, 6 countries, 45 days, and we're hosted by the heads of state in each country. And I mean, you don't even see your luggage or your passport when you land. You go to a VVIP protocol. They just take your passport and your luggage they don't even know what your luggage looks like, but your luggage is in the car. You understand? I mean, it was surreal. It changed my life. Went to Ghana, Senegal, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Nigeria, all West African countries. And it literally changed my life forever. And, I did my DNA test. Okay. So when I did my DNA test years later, it showed me all the parts of Africa that I'm from, right? Naturally, through slavery, we mixed up. So I got a little bit of everything. But it made sense when I did get there why I fell in love with it right away. And I've never stopped going since.
And I can't wait till this is over so I could go back and we could go back and we can handle the business we started on that initial trip. And I think, it's important for people to understand part of the journey. So it's all right for people to hear that this is how people arrive. There's no script. That wasn't a script. He was doing business, though. He was working on something that turned into a much bigger project. And you got to be ready. They say if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
That's true. I'll tell you one other funny part, and you can dissect however you like. I want to say I'm 12 years now. This is 12 years ago. This has been a 12-year love affair, and I don't think it's ever going to stop. I want to say 4 years into that, I was in Ghana with that same uncle, and I was watching music videos on TV while we were waiting to get picked up to go somewhere. And on the TV was some music videos, and I didn't like the quality. I complained about it. I said, it looks bad. And he said to me, and I never forget this, he said, well, do something about it. Don't complain about it. Be value added, do something about it, because you're here enough anyway, right? That's your background anyway, right? I said, yes. And then I said, yes, I am here enough. He said, well, then I'm sure your brothers and sisters in Africa would love to collaborate with you. And if you can be value added or teach something to improve the quality of productions, then you should do that. And then and at that moment, I didn't realize I am here enough. I forgot all about film and television. And I said, well, yeah, it makes sense. So soon after, I started introducing that background into the continent, from music videos to commercials to TV shows to films. I mean, we've done it all, from West Africa to South to East. So it came full circle, right? It came full circle as I started off that story with one thing, pivoted to another, found one of the things I still love to do. We were able to add that back to the equation, and it still complements, and it does exactly what my uncle said I should do. Be value added, collaborate with others. Since then, I've brought so many people from Hollywood into Africa. I brought people from Africa into the US. I've collaborated on film, television projects, concerts, humanitarian efforts, you name it, and all of the other things. And those other things, for me, everything follows the same through line. And that through line for me is under the umbrella of entrepreneurship, but it's also under the umbrella of legacy and bridging the gap. Because my personal mantra is bridging the gap between US and Africa through the power of business, education, entertainment. That's yes. So it doesn't matter what the sector is, as long as it complements both worlds. It's the same highway for me. It's just different exits. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No doubt. No doubt. So I think it's important for the people out here that's watching and tuned in. If there was anything that you would want to say to them as a fellow entrepreneur, an inspiring entrepreneur, an established entrepreneur, as it pertains to, we talked about the word pivot and what that means. If there was anything that you would be able to share with them in regards to some advice or some encouragement, let us know what would that be. And then before we get out of here too, we want to make sure that you share with us what projects that you're currently working on as well.
Yeah, so the first part, I go back to what I said about the station. It all starts with the station that you operate on. So here we are. No one is better than the next right now. No country is better than the next right now. We're all in our homes, stationary, right? There's no private jet that's going to make my life different than yours. Money is not going to change that. The corona is out to get anybody if you're not vigilant, right? So we're all home. Now, do you go in your corner, as I mentioned earlier, and just, woe is me? What do? As an entrepreneur, I get up the same way I would if this wasn't corona, right? I would get up, take my shower, get dressed for the day. I even put my smell goods on. I come into my home office. I'm ready. I'm not gonna run around all day in my pajamas. I'm not gonna put a suit on, but I'm gonna be showered. I'm gonna be mentally ready. My bed is made. My environment is clean, so I can think cleanly, right? And then I'm on my computer. I'm either renegotiating things that are because the situation is out of my control, right? So there might be obligations I might have as an entrepreneur. I need to make those tough calls and call people or companies and say, hey, listen, this is what needs to happen. Can we negotiate this? Can this happen this way? Right? I need to do those things. I need to be proactive on things that I am currently working on that I either had to suspend or postpone and just try to keep things on ice. Again, people I've hired, companies I've hired, we're pushing back to this time or that time. We'll be back in touch. I'm following up with my communication so that everybody knows what's happening, right? So that when things do switch back on, I'm not scrambling. I've communicated. People know what's going to happen next or what to expect from me. Then there's things that I'm looking at that, hey, have been in development that I'm still working on, and having those exchanges in terms of things that are in the pipeline that we're developing. So those conversations are still happening, so that once things open back up, those can go to the next level. So all day long, I'm still working. I can't go anywhere, but we can do Zoom. I can read contracts. I can initiate contracts. I can, whatever needs to happen, I can follow up. I can do all of these things to keep things on ice, to also put things in a better position for when the lights cut back on. We're in a position to grow and move forward. So, but that goes back to the channel I make sure I operate on, which is tied to my end game. I have no time to sit around and waste and complain. I don't know what the world is going to look like post-corona, but I'm still taking the steps to be in the best position as possible to be able to assess which way to go. And if things can go forward, I'm in position. I'm not scrambling. So I think from an entrepreneur standpoint, I just go down to the basics. And the basics are what channel you're operating on. What station mentally are you operating on? Is your environment clean? And the environment represents your affairs, right? If you're messy and you probably got 1,000 emails you didn't return, you probably got stuff that's slipping through the cracks, you can't find anything, right? So, I'm just giving you the tools that I use. I still treat it with some form of respect and some form of, I keep my regiment going, right? I try to eat better. I try to exercise. I try to do the things mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and information-wise to keep myself ready to go. Now, if I had to also talk about, trying to do things that allow me to travel light. You know what I mean by travel light? So there's some things I'm involved in, or I've taken losses in that are either brick and mortar related or heavy assets related, where I can't move something fast enough, right? So you have those kind of investments or things that you're involved in, but then you got to also look at things that are more service-based, right? Service-based is your expertise, your time, or tech-based, or education-based, things that don't entail a monthly lease payment or rent payment, right? Things that the income outweighs what you got to put out. So those are other things that I look at, that I'm involved in. I'm trying to grow, that can put myself in a better position to deal with things like this, right? So if I had several stores or 30 real estate projects, well, they're all on hold right now, right? But meanwhile, that's still overhead that has to be paid unless the government says don't worry about it until things come back on. But meanwhile, you have whether it's construction, you got hard money, you got your money, you have bank money, whatever money is out there, that's still incurring costs, right? Or mortgages is still incurring costs. I'm not saying anything bad about real estate. I love real estate. I've been in real estate since '95. I understand. I think everyone should still, no matter what you're into, have real estate be a part of that, but not your end all be all is what I would say, right? So we got to look at how do we travel light and be it so that we can remain agile, and that if something happens that's beyond our control, we're not crushed and shattered, you know? And that was a lesson I learned in 2008. I had to file bankruptcy. It was, I was so stretched with real estate. It's new construction. I used to develop a lot. New construction, rehabs, stuff I own, rental properties, stuff I was selling. I couldn't sell anything. I couldn't refinance anything. Money was frozen, right? And you get to a point where you can't control what's happening. So I had to press the reset button. So I've learned from that to make sure that things that I get involved with now are a lot more agile. And I'm not talking stock market stuff because that's good too for other people, but that's not my game because you can't control that.
Something that you just said that is important to everybody that's on this tuned in right now is the reset button. If COVID-19 didn't do anything else, it just hit the reset button.
Yes.
A brand new button.
Oh yeah.
We're not familiar with living in these conditions. We all got stories of things we've been through, adversity, challenges, and all of those things. But now we're at a place where we have to actually put our big boy britches on, our big girl britches on, and really be able to mentally cope and get through this in a way that we are still aggressively pursuing what our goals and dreams are and making sure that it lends itself to generational wealth. But one of the things that I want people to also know too is that in regards to the content that you produce and things that you produce, we talk about equity and ownership a lot. And that's a part of what a lot of creatives should understand and respect in regards to having ownership in your collateral or your work or intellectual property is very important because I know you're able to license your films, projects that you've done globally, however you choose.
Yeah, I can talk about that actually. So I have this thing where I tell people, don't ever call me a filmmaker. And that's no disrespect to a filmmaker. But let me tell you the difference. And the reason why I adapt, and I speak on panels and different things like that. And I tell people, you're better off being a content creator or content producer than being a filmmaker. And why do I say that? Because words matter. It's cute. It sounds good. Someone's a filmmaker. Typically, a filmmaker isn't concerned about the business of that film, right? So filmmaker has a passion project. Somebody connects filmmaker with someone who wants to give them some money to make the film, right? They make the film. They sell the investor on a dream that, they give them comps, just like in real estate, right? They give them comps. 3 films that sold at Sundance. Now, you have no guarantees that your film is going to get into Sundance, but this is typically what happens. And they give them comps about some films that sold in Sundance. A film was made for $1 million, it sold for $30 million at Sundance. And it's going to make all this money in the box office, and you're going to get your money back. That's typically, right? But really, they just want to make their film. The film gets made, it doesn't get into Sundance, and they're shopping for some kind of distribution. Finally, the film gets out, but the distribution deal didn't cover the money to, 1, recoup the cost of production, 2, make a profit. And frankly, the filmmaker isn't even concerned about the things that the investor is concerned about in terms of making a profit. But if you're a content producer, and then the word producer, I'll break that down separately. But if if you're a content producer, the word producer means you have a fiduciary responsibility to see the project through from inception to monetization. Okay. Now you have some people who come onto a project, they're just a producer in kind, meaning they're going to help produce, put it in the can through the production process, pre-production process, maybe a little bit of post. But anyone who's a lead producer, from development to delivery to marketing to managing the recoupment of the funds and making sure that you structure the project in a deal that lends itself to making a profit, because then you can have this as a business model to keep repeating that. But if you're just a filmmaker and you just want to make your film and you're happy you got in Sundance or went to some other film festivals, and meanwhile your investors never made their money back, never made a profit. Anyone who has enough money to invest in the film typically knows other people who have enough money to invest in the film, and typically they talk. Typically they say, hey, well, hey, Kim, I made a lot of money on the stock market. I made a lot of money in this real estate deal. What else you got going on? Oh, well, I just invested in this film or two. I made 20-30% return on my money. And this guy is, these young content creators are doing really well. We're making a lot of money together. Well, Kim, as an investor, you're going to automatically say, well, how do I get involved? Because I want to put some more money to work, right? That's how it works. But the minute I say I invested in some filmmakers, and I didn't make anything, and these guys don't even communicate with me anymore, then your chances are you're not going to be silly enough to put your money in the film, right? But meanwhile, the film and TV industry is multi hundreds of billions of dollars industry, right? But the indie is not getting it right. So I use the word content producer because producer means business, and business should be taken seriously and just put around content. So that's my game. And my game has been independently creating content that we can still own the intellectual property. Why do you want to own the intellectual property? You want to own the intellectual property because 20 years later, you still own it, and or 5 years later, you license it to one company. 5 years later, that deal is done, or 3 years later, now you can license it again to the next company. And then again to the different platform. Maybe you license this one for TV. Maybe you license to this company for SVOD, streaming video on demand, which is like your Hulu's, Amazon, Netflix, right? And then maybe it's just for North America. So that means now I can license the same content to Africa or different countries within Africa. I can license it to France. I can license it to Beijing. I can license it to UK. I can license it to some channel in the Caribbean. I own the IP. I own the intellectual property. So I can keep relicensing it. And guess what? That is something that you can leave in your will. So if you think as an entrepreneur, if you think about Michael Jackson, the Beatles bought his catalog. Remember that? Remember someone, I think it was Michael Jackson bought the Beatles catalog.
Our lawyer, my partner and our lawyer did that deal.
Well,
did that deal.
Well, I mean, in order to have a catalog, it's all about the catalog, right? So if you have a catalog, a body of work that you own the intellectual property on, that has some value, that companies would love to license, that has value. And that is something that you can also leave into your will, right? You leave that in your will as part of your estate. So that your children or your family, whomever, can keep relicensing it or keep getting royalties off of whatever you've created while you were on earth. That is why you want to own your intellectual property. If not, some people, to each his own. Some people have the opportunity to work for hire and make a lot of money that way. Okay, they may get a deal with a studio. They may have different projects funded that the television network or the studio may own the intellectual property, and they may get to do a lot of projects with them, and that's also good. But for me, from the entrepreneur side, I see the value in intellectual owning the IP. So I'd rather spend my energy working for myself in that way, where in the end, if I don't own all the IP, I own equity in it. So, but that's important. So I try to tell people, it's not just about making a project. You got to understand the business that you're trying to enter into, because it's a business. It really is a business. It literally is a business. And I've been blessed enough to now be a go-to person, because a lot of times we may have content that's already ready because we've went out there, took the risk, and created it. And then a network might come online and say, hey, we're about to launch this new platform, or an existing platform may say, we need some films, we need some series. What do you have? And we're ready. It's in a can. We're ready, So I've been privy to experience that. So content, they say content is king, and I'm seeing that it really is. So my early days, it was much more difficult. People didn't see it that way. Nowadays, the big guys are now coming on the independent turf, right? And they're now looking to partner with people who are able to pivot and make things happen at a price. They need those guys. So when you go into a big network or a studio and you see, you see how vast and expansive the company is. I go into that same place, I see it differently. I see overhead. I see they have a lot of overhead. What pays for the overhead? Content. You understand?
Yeah.
I got all those people working, all those health benefits and expense cards. All of that is overhead. And here I come with content that, they don't have to, an executive might be scared to greenlight a project or your project, Jeff, because if it doesn't go well, they might get fired. Mm-hmm. Right? But if I come with something that's finished that everyone can see, do we all agree we want to license this? We want to take a risk on this? Everyone can see it already. Right? So it's not about one person being fired. We all agree we want to take this content. They license the content. For me, they're happy to have something. They got to feed the machine. Me, I'm happy. I still own IP. We make some money. We relicense it again later on. So for me, that business model makes the most sense. And if you think about it, what would the world be doing right now if it wasn't for film, TV, music, and our phones from YouTube content?
Just think about the breaks that have been pumped on production right now, and the demand has quadrupled for more content. Yeah. As a result of everybody being able to sit down and watch and catch up and all these things, it's even more of a demand for content right now.
Exactly. I think by the time we get out of this, we would have watched everything. There's nothing else to watch, right? So you asked me what's going on now. I have some stuff in post right now, a couple of things in post-production right now. I have some stuff in development, and then some stuff that's headed to production right now. One project we just had to pump the brakes on. We pushed back. We were supposed to start shooting a week ago, but we keep pushing it back, 2 weeks at a time, 30 days. And that's a project that had about 276 people working, in front of the camera, behind the camera. Yeah, we got to push it back. So we're affected by that. So on the film side and development, those two, more stuff going on the TV side. That's again in either development, either waiting to go into production as soon as we can go back outside, and in post-production. And so, and that's ranging from different platforms, whether it be, Viacom companies or, just different companies. I won't say names, but we've been privy to work with a lot of different broadcasters and platforms, because everybody is really trying to ramp up their content, their content library. And I think it's a really good time to be, a content creator. It really is. It really is.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, Samad, for sharing so many nuggets. I mean, first of all, understanding the business behind the content, I think, is a major takeaway from what you said, because that'll enable you to even understand how you might want to pivot or how you might see an opportunity if you really understand the business behind what it is that you're creating. And I just want to thank you again for joining us on the Consciouspreneur Conversation. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
Really.
Yeah, appreciate you. And before we get out of here too, we want to make sure that we acknowledge the people that keep the lights on and have sponsored us. We have, of course, Rutgers University Business School CUEED, the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development.
Yes.
We have Express Newark, and we have Capital One, and of course the Newark Business Hub.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry, Kim, go ahead.
Yeah, and the Newark Business Hub, when we say the Newark Business Hub, it doesn't just include Newark, right? Newark Business Hub is a global movement for creative entrepreneurs taking our economy to the next level. And it includes our partners like Linda Steele at Art Up in Memphis, Havana, Cuba, and Paradiso Organization and Cinesoft. It includes our people like Mad Events and P&G Travel. And of course, we can't forget our own Rutgers Newark Office of Communications and the Rutgers Office of Continuing and Professional Education with Ken Carmichael. We got to give a shout out to our whole family because, see, there are resources that are lining up during this time to support you.
True. That is true. Very true.
My name is Kimberly Williams, and I'm your co-host for the Consciouspreneur Conversation. I'm an entrepreneur, co-founder of FemWorks, and the co-founder of so many other initiatives, including chambers of commerce to support entrepreneurs. But this right here is the Consciouspreneur Conversation.
Yes, and again, I'm Jeff Billingsley. I'm CEO of Cobblestone Multimedia, one of the co-founders of the Newark Business Hub, and I'm actually really, adamant about being able to take entrepreneurship into places that are underserved and elevating entrepreneurs, especially creative entrepreneurs that are in the frame of helping to build capacity in economies through urban cities and making places cool. But we got to get to that place where we have some ownership and equity, as Samad spoke to. I think it's important for us to hear people's points of views and journeys. We spend hours, countless hours watching certain content. This is about knowledge, and knowledge is definitely power. We have to equip ourselves with this information right now and begin to activate and put these things into practice. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Kim. And we got to shout out our producer behind the scene, Michelle.
Yes, Michelle McClammy.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We might need to see you real quick just to say thank you for what you do behind the scenes. I appreciate you so much. And this is the Consciouspreneur Conversation. We are a movement that invests in creative entrepreneurs, that educates you, that help to take your game to the next level. We are the Newark Business Hub. You can check us out on our website, which is newarkbusinesshub.com, or everywhere on social media.
Yes.
Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, please stay safe, everybody. Stay vigilant. Make sure we're boosting our immune systems up, and love on your people while they're here.
That's
Peace.
right. That's right. Peace. See you next time.